Now, let's talk about how they spent your money in Parliament today. Well, the Labor Party decided that they would go all in and try to vote for the climate emergency. Eliza Edwards with how this all played out just after question time.
It was the $577 million announcement designed to defy the critics, the coalition joining forces with the New South Wales government on Sunday to commit to building a new reservoir near Tamworth and expand Wyangala Dam at Cowra. It's now been revealed half the money is being loaned out to the state and will need to be paid back, while another $75 million had already been announced 3 years ago.
What we see is increasingly a pattern whereby the Prime Minister is loose with the truth.
I was very clear. Our 50-50 funding...
Members on my left.
Our contribution is comprised half of grant, half of concessional finance.
Coming under fire from his opponents and high-profile broadcaster Alan Jones, the Prime Minister forced to defend his government's drought policy during a fiery interview.
$1 million into each side.
PM, how does that feed a cow? PM, how does that feed a cow?
I'd like to answer you.
How does it feed a cow, PM?
Also on the defence, in a private phone call with a struggling farmer in northwestern New South Wales, whose emotional interview on 2GB went viral.
Give us some bloody hope, Scott. My town is dying. The country's dying, and you're not giving us hope.
I spoke to him yesterday, and what I did yesterday is I took him through all the things that I just talked to you about.
The Greens and Crossbench say it's impossible to ignore the links between the drought and climate change as they launched a failed sky-high bid to draw attention to the issue over Parliament.
It's undeniable that the drought that's gripping much of Australia is made worse by climate change.
The Greens had lofty ambitions to fly this balloon over Parliament as part of a push for Australia to declare a climate emergency. But following government intervention, the Aviation Authority deflated the idea, announcing a temporary ban on flying over the area. After discussions in Shadow Caucus, Labor MPs have resolved to support the motion declaring a climate emergency. The declaration will require Coalition MPs to cross the floor should it succeed. Andrew Wilkie arguing it's a test for Mr Morrison's MPs as to whether they back the science on global warming.
If there's a single member in the House of Representatives who votes against this motion and they're in a drought-ravaged seat or a bushfire-affected seat, they should lose their seat.
It remains to be seen if Parliament will declare a climate emergency or if this latest push amounts to little more than hot air. Eliza Edwards, Sky News, Canberra.
Sorry, that was about 2.5 minutes of everything but what we wanted to talk about, but then we get into the obvious there, which is about the climate emergency stuff, as important as all of that is. Today there was an attempt to get it up in the lower house. It failed. No doubt, Corey, you're going to be dealing with it if you haven't already in the Senate. But what I find really annoying about this is not a debate about whether climate change exists or not, but as David Gazzard, who is a lobbyist, friend of the Prime Minister and a pretty smart cookies had to say today, which is this is all about escalating language from the extreme left, which was global warming into climate change, into extreme weather and climate emergency. And of course, when something is an emergency, you can't throw enough at it at any one particular time. But what I find so particularly empty about these declarations of climate emergency is all of the people who voted for that thing today will all go on Thursday afternoon to Canberra Airport, where they will all get on to walk into the Chairman's Lounge, or they'll go into the Club for Virgin, and then they'll hop on a plane and go back wherever it is they are around the country. And then 2 days later, they'll turn around and on Sunday afternoon, they'll go back to the Chairman's Lounge or club in their respective cities. They will then get on the plane, go business class and arrive. And then the following Thursday, well, they go to the Chairman's Club, they go to the club, they get on the plane and they go home. They will all take 4 planes in 2 weeks at least. Oh, but they've voted to stop a climate emergency, Corey.
And Paul, they'll take their clothes to the dry cleaner to get the stain of hypocrisy out of them. They're quite extraordinary. I mean, they do appropriate language, these left zealots, because they take what was global warming, as you pointed out, and they turn into climate change, which has been going on for eons, and they never have to justify it. Now we're all going to be extinct because somehow we've got a drought or we've got bushfires happening. I mean, these things have been happening in Australia forever. The climate has been changing forever. And anyone that says carbon dioxide is driving it, man's carbon dioxide, is really not learning the lessons of history. And that's all you have to do. It goes in cycles.
Well, but
and
again,
these people are never letting a good crisis go to waste. So they're using it to further their cause, which is extreme Marxism.
But also, I mean, Rita, we are... I mean, the climate emergency stuff is way beyond does it exist. This is the demand of Extinction Rebellion. Right? This is the demand of the people who also simultaneously say we must have the mass removal of post-colonial systems of oppression. Like that's the level of wank that's involved with this. But, I mean, is Andrew Wilkie going to be swimming across the Bass Strait? Is Zali Steggall going to be riding a penny farthing up the Hume Highway and then eventually getting to the northern beaches? No. All of these people demand that maximum embarrassment and pressure must be put on the government. The citizen must absolutely hand over everything they've got, but they don't change a single thing about their lives to show us how they would carry the load.
Absolutely, it's empty words. That's the thing about these climate alarmists. They are massive hypocrites. They do not lead by example, as we all know with Zali Steggall, who wants to turn Warringah into little California. She doesn't even have solar panels on her roof. Even I've got solar panels on my roof, for the love of God. So these people are absolute hypocrites. They do not live what they preach. And this whole notion of if you don't vote for a climate emergency, then you're going to be voted out. Are these people delusional? We just had the climate change election. They lost. It was only a few months back. Remember that? There was the referendum on climate change. That's what they told us when they thought they were going to, it's going to be a cakewalk. They ended up losing because they did not cost their policies. The Australian people are not fools. They do not want to sign up for targets that are going to bankrupt them and the country. So if you can bring costed policies to an election, then fine. But you can't just have all this rhetoric, no costing behind it, and expect to be voted into government. That's a big part of why they lost the unlosable election. They seem to have already forgotten that happened this year.
Well, also, I mean, we've moved, pretty quickly in the space rhetorically of, what was it, the May election to now, to this sort of McCarthy-esque question, which is, have you ever, or, what's your view? Is there a climate emergency? There's only one way to answer that, and it's a yes, no. It's not, we're not even, does it exist? Is it a thing? Do you think we should have action? We're now at, again, we're at the language of the nutters. So what does it say to you that the Labor Party has decided to fall in with this? I saw Jeremy Corbyn in the UK Parliament last night, and I'm sure you probably did too, sitting up nerdily like I did, watching the response to the Queen's speech. And among other things, he praises Extinction Rebellion and uses terms like climate emergency. And I'm going, geez, this bloke's got no shot. And then we learned today that the genius that is Albo, let's go into the Parliament and let's sidle up with Andrew Wilkie, Zali Steggall and freaking Adam Bandt, who cheered on the idea that climate emergency on the way into Canberra on Sunday night was on a giant electric billboard.
I know. Well, look, it just shows you the Labor Party's learnt nothing since the election. The Labor Party years and years ago used to be a mainstream, moderate, pragmatic party, but it's now been taken over by the extreme loony left, not only in the Labor Party but outside the Labor Party. This is the Labor Party being led by Extinction Rebellion. And rather than toning down the rhetoric, becoming a little bit more sensible, listening to people like frontbenchers Joel Fitzgibbon saying, look, we should just simply adopt the government's still ambitious climate targets in accordance with our international obligations and try to settle climate change down, noting that the government itself is spending billions and billions of dollars to address climate change. Here's Labor ramping up the rhetoric, and it is empty rhetoric. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, I saw that picture earlier today of Mark Butler and Pat Conroy looking very sober, sad, serious looks on their faces, saying we're going to move this motion, saying we've got a climate emergency. But what is Labor's policies? We still don't actually know what Labor would do if they got elected into government at the next election to address climate change. OK, we only just had an election earlier this year, but it's still, coming up to 5-6 months since the election, and we don't know what Labor's doing. But this is a very, very worrying sign. And the Labor Party, to be honest, is deeply split now on the issue of climate change. And even the internal lobby group LEAN, the Labor Environment Action Network, I had a leaked submission from them to Labor's post-election
LEAN
review.
leaked?
And LEAN leaked, and LEAN actually, of all people, LEAN actually heavily criticised Mark Butler for that inflated, crazy rhetoric that he was propagating during the campaign. Couldn't cost the policy, couldn't say what the impact was on the economy.
Of doing nothing is more
and now,
expensive.
forget about that, he's now ramped it up into a climate emergency. I mean, the Labor Party has just completely lost the plot.
Yep, look, but this is on the same day where they were starting to show, the past couple of days, a tactic in Question Time. Now, clearly, they have worked out that one of the things that they have to try to attack or dismantle, but because it's not fake, you can't dismantle it, but anyway, the Prime Minister's authenticity, his connection to the quiet Australian, the way that he is in sync with normal people, speaking like them, doing things like them. So look at how many different questions effectively were the same question they've asked in the past 2 days, which is, are you dodgy, Prime Minister?
My questions to the Prime Minister. Why do the Prime Minister's talking points make absolutely no reference to the 1.9 million Australians who are looking for a job or for more work, the worst wages growth on record, weak household consumption and retail spending, and the worst household savings rate in a decade?
When will the Prime Minister admit that his future drought fund hasn't delivered and will never deliver 1 cent directly to desperate farming families?
Can the Prime Minister tell the asbestos victims who are in the gallery right now why he is on the side of rogue employers like James Hardie rather than the victims in the gallery today?
Why won't the Prime Minister admit what these to this table from his own minister's department shows that not a single project under the Urban Congestion Fund announced over 18 months ago has actually commenced? Not one.
So I'm going to take a break in a second here, Troy, but there's a tactic here where clearly someone in Labor who is smart enough to work out authenticity is something we need to attack. If somehow we can either prove that he's not authentic or he's telling half-truths, all the rest of it, well, then maybe there's a political win there for us. But all of that's then blown away when they go into the Parliament a couple of hours later and sidle up to the same stuff that dickheads who chain themselves to things in Brisbane can go before the court 11 times in a row want.
Yeah, I think they've recognised that Scott Morrison is an asset for the government. He's got a leadership edge over Anthony Albanese, so they're trying to attack his credibility and his authenticity, but they didn't do it very effectively. And to suggest, of course, that Scott Morrison is somehow on the side of employers who are poisoning their workers with asbestos is just, it's just la-la land, lunatic stuff. I mean, the Labor Party, seriously, I don't think in my lifetime it's ever been in such a worse position than it is at the moment. And I'm not trying to over-exaggerate, but those parliamentary tactics are just an absolute disaster. Look, Labor Party's got to get serious about why it lost the election, come up with some good policies for the next election and try to reconnect with the community. But this sort of stuff, it's just crazy.
Well, also, you know, given the nature of things, they knew what the 6 p.m. news was going to be about, whether, you know, they wanted to or not. Drought was going to be the thing that would matter today, yet they didn't pivot into any of that. We were getting James Hardie as the thing that they were bringing up, Rita.
They really are, like Troy said, in disarray. It's not just on the environment. You look at their national security statements, border protection, this drive, this push from Christina Keneally to bring the foreign fighters, not just their families and children, but the fighters themselves back. It's our moral obligation, supposedly, if you listen to Christina. I mean, they are just completely lost. Rather than going to the centre, they seem to be going more to the loony fringes of the left. Who are they winning over by advocating these positions? How are they going to win an election by pushing these policies that are, you know, almost hard green policies? It's madness.
Correct. We're going to get to Mark Latham in a second, but Corey, I mean, I've got to take a break here, but fair dinkum. I mean, own goal on own goal, but also, look, and it's about the government. It's always about the government, and we do spend probably too much time talking about the people who aren't the government, but zero lessons learned. In fact, quite the opposite when you look at how they carry themselves.
Yeah, here's a newsflash for Labor. The Australian people like Scott Morrison. They like him as Prime Minister. He's brought some credibility to the role, and they like his persona and his shtick. The only thing they care about, they don't care about the urban congestion fund. They care about their quality of life, about their jobs, the ability to have a house and keep interest rates low, and they care about the plight of farmers and those who are less fortunate. If he sticks to that, let Labor get sidetracked, join the Greens, come up with their hair shirt brigade or whatever they want to do, and he'll be Prime Minister for a long time to come.
All right.